This is part 3 of the Health and Wellness Super Saver public hearing that was held a few weeks back. I have squeezed in at the end part of the program on Monday, the P&Z meeting, where they said various things about the letter that was sent to them by the attorney for the Health and Wellness Center of Torrington. It's kind of squeezed in here, so I wanted to get it all in so everybody can hear it. There are some parts that were talked about later in this week's P&Z meeting, and I've edited them, put them in there so you could hear for yourself.
I just wanted to clarify one thing. There's I think 9 criteria for special permits, and Mr. Clausen talked about these a little bit. And I have a few extra copies. I know they were out on the table at the last hearing too. I have a few extra copies if anyone wants to come up and grab a copy. But I'll just go through them very quickly. A is that the location is suitable for the use. Whether the location and size of the site and the nature or intensity of the operations involved with the use will be in harmony with the appropriate and orderly development of the area. B, appropriate improvements. Whether the site improvements associated with the proposed development, its location of the buildings and activities, design of the buildings, extent of landscaping, etc., will be attractive and suitable in relation to the site and to the existing and probable future character of the neighborhood in which the use is located. C, suitable transportation conditions, whether the nature of the proposed use or activity and the characteristics of the transportation system will adversely affect safety in the streets or unreasonably increase traffic congestion in the area or interfere with the pattern of vehicular circulation. D, adequate public utilities, whether the provisions for water supply, sewage disposal, and stormwater drainage will conform to the accepted practices and will not unduly burden the capacity of such facilities. E, adequate public services, whether the proposed use or activity will provide easy accessibility for fire apparatus and police protection and is laid out and equipped to further the provision of emergency services. F, environmental protection and conservation, whether appropriate consideration has been given to the protection, preservation, and or enhancement of natural, scenic, historic, and unique resources. G, long-term viability, whether adequate provisions have been made for the sustained maintenance of the proposed development, structures, streets, and other improvements. H, purposes, whether the proposed use or activity will conflict with the purposes of these regulations. And I, the plan of conservation and development, whether the proposed use or activity will facilitate achievement of one or more of the goals, objectives, policies, and recommendations of the plan of conservation and development. So just to clarify, it does have to be in general agreement with the plan of conservation and development as per the considerations for special permits. So we have to look at these, and in addition to typical zoning regulations that would be applicable as well. That's what the commission has to use to make this decision.
Motion to close the public hearing.
If nobody else is going to speak, I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Do you want to say anything else before closing statement or anything?
Sure. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Just, again, Attorney Joe Williams for the applicant. Just to refer to a couple of the comments that have been made. It's true that this application is not about any one person and it shouldn't be about a motion. But it's important that the commission then also distinguish the closing of Mr. Dewan's grocery store from the merits of this application. There was a question early on in tonight's hearing about how many jobs did he provide versus how many jobs will we provide. Respectfully, that's the wrong comparison to be made, because it's not about the closing of the store. He's decided to do that, and that's been, I think, made clear and well established. He has every right to do that. The question is whether granting of this whether granting this application complies with your regulations and will bring some benefits to Main Street. I think we've given you ample facts, not speculation about what could happen down the road, but actual facts about how having this medical center on Main Street will contribute to a thriving business downtown, and will provide, will create taxpayers, will provide paid taxpayers, will provide customers, will draw people to Main Street, and will be a benefit to downtown. To Mr. Clausen's comments about the plan of conservation and development, you did address some of the relevant pages. I would respectfully submit, though, the criterion in your special permit factors says, will you advance one or more of the goals? I think it says at the POCD. And I've looked at that kind of thing in many towns and in many plans of conservation and development. And one thing I can say to you confidently is there is no application that can comply with all aspects of any plan of conservation and development. Why is that? Because the plan is a statement of goals and aspirations, and it's good, and it should be. That's the community's vision. But any particular proposal that you want to build or do on a particular piece of property will comply with some of those goals and may not comply with some of those goals. Inevitably, you conflict with some because they're so broadly stated. But this application, I think, pretty clearly does comply with some of those goals, and I read them to you specifically in Chapter 8 of the plan, where it talks about increasing and maintaining the community capacity for affordable and accessible health care, and where it talks about the benefit to the community of non-municipal community facilities and how this town has set a goal of preserving and maintaining and encouraging the operation of those facilities. And in your plan, you list a number of those types of facilities and how they are benefits to the community. You even make specific reference to the Winsted Health Center and how it's an important anchor to the downtown. Well, we respectfully submit to you, this Community Health and Wellness Center will be the same kind of asset to your community. Thank you.
Does anyone else from the public wish to address the commission?
I think you better reiterate the rules. The some people weren't here when you read them.
Doesn't the applicant usually get to go last, Mr. Chairman? That's what I thought I was doing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not.
I think we're,
Okay.
unless there's something else.
No, I'm talking about the rules of engagement from the spectators.
I read, I think we're pretty much.
Excuse me, I thought there would be one more chance. I was told this is an open meeting. I got one more thing to say, please.
Should be allowed to
And I'm not sure the protocol.
Couldn't hurt, I mean, whatever, it's up to you.
No.
If they want to.
Do you want to rebut?
I'll
See what
reserve
he's
the
saying.
right,
You reserve the right.
if needed.
Better to let folks talk than not, that's always.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, again. I really don't have much more to say. You're a volunteer board. You're doing your best. That's all we can ask of you. And I know you have the community in mind. That's what you're doing. I already said I have to pass over. Just want to know that I oppose the application. Thank you. Good night.
You're comfortable?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. You spoke too soon.
I think so.
Yeah, I'm in favor of businesses being able to be run by businessmen. And I'm in favor of individual property rights and that kind of thing. Now, they've offered a nice compromise here. They've said you can have a lot of the things you want, but I've heard in this meeting by opening up a co-op in front of their building there. Now, they have to solve Georgie's questions. They got to make sure the fire department is there, it's right across the street, all that kind of thing. But that, I think, would satisfy a lot of the questions that came up tonight. There could be a grocery store in there, there could be a co-op in there. Just that we have to find somebody who thinks they can make $1 doing it and wants to pay the rent and run the co-op. That's kind of what should happen. There's a nice compromise put forward, and I think it should be considered.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion that we close the
You don't have
public
anything
hearing
else to say? You're all
on
set.
application 17-04.
Second.
All those, any discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Under old business, we opened up discussion of PZ 1704 special permit 372, 376 Main Street and 30 Elm Street, map 110, block 001, lots 2, 2A, 18, 18A, applicant Community Health and Wellness Center, Greater Torrington, Inc., owner Winsted Super Saver Property, LLC, proposed relocation and expansion.
Okay, just a question. It's 30 Elm Street. I thought that was the parcel that's taken out.
It's, I believe it's actually the parking lot area.
Oh,
They did a little
parking.
bit of
Remember where they have the little building there right next to Monica's?
That's
That,
excluded.
if you look on the map, right, that is 30. That's what they're calling 30. I think it's 30.
It's 30.
It's just a parking lot. It doesn't encompass any.
It's not, the building is.
The building is
Separate
separate.
parcel.
That's it.
Yeah.
The land goes right around the tight. I don't have the map in front of me, but
Which is the school building.
that is correct. They do the
School now.
Regional 7, I think, at least.
That's number 26, I think.
Is that, okay, so I'm sorry.
30 is just a parking lot.
The parking lot, there's a parking lot that they
Yeah.
made there,
Yeah.
out of the redesign. So, correct. Yeah, right here, see? This is a school, this is the parking that they have on the side. And this, that's almost just a little bit beyond the building. And he's
I'm sure that folks can hear, that's all.
subdivision.
I'm sure they want to hear. Oh, I see. Yeah. 30, not X. That's right. And let's try and keep like one person talking at a time, not a lot of in between each other, because it's difficult to.
Decipher,
Yeah,
okay.
decipher, yeah, it's very difficult.
Well, first off, we should read into the record that the staff and the town had no objections. Police, fire. Okay, this is March 13th, 2017, application review on the part of Mark Mellinson. He had 2 or 3 issues that I know were attended to by the applicant. Steve, Chief Fitzgerald had no issues.
Police chief, yeah.
Police chief, sorry.
Fireman.
Jim Rollins had no issues.
Works.
Public Works. And the fire marshal, Steve Williams, again, had no comments or
Based on the
based
Site
on the
plan.
application, the
Site.
application site plan, absolutely.
not any building.
Okay, now what I would suggest is, as a means of just trying to get ourselves organized and move forward, is that we'll go down through these considerations that we've enumerated a couple times tonight in considering the application for a special permit. The first being a suitable location for use, whether the location and size of the site and the nature and intensity of the operations involved with the use will be in harmony with the appropriate and orderly development of the area. I open it up to discussion as to your comments as to how each of you feels on that particular point. Who wishes to elaborate? Anyone?
Well, I mentioned this earlier, that when we had to open the public hearing, a suitable location for use. This is, refers, and again, Steve brought up item I, under this is plan of conservation development, certainly does play a part of this overall deliberation. And this suitability, as I said, there's 3 centers to the community on Main Street. One is the heart of it is right there at Elm Street, where this property is located, pretty much. And then the east side is down by the community college, and the west is up by the Congregational Church at that far end, where the new Dunkin' Donuts is. So I'd say, in relative to harmony and the appropriate orderly development of the area, this would be a stumbling block for future expansion down in this area, because of the it's not in harmony with the retail environment that we have there, and it seems to be working out well. And you know, that's not a statement about how successful the market has been or not, but it's a matter of the heart of the town having retail that feeds off one another. So I would say that it's not a suitable location.
I agree with George on that. Not only that, there have been several studies done throughout the years, going back many, many years, and every one of them alluded to the fact that we should have a viable downtown with retail and restaurants for walking traffic. So with that, that's just how I feel about it.
The last study we had also mentioned that concerning the center being a retail storefronts as the hub of the Main Street. The college that we had, the college students, remember they came?
Yes.
They did that study just a couple of years ago. So, I mean, that's what their thing was. And then we just, Main Street in Hartford, what's that group? I forget. I've gone to...
Connecticut Main Street.
Yeah, Connecticut Main Street. The last meeting I went down there, they talked about the center of the town being the hub of the community. So, that's just food for thought.
We don't want to bring any new information in during deliberations, just what came in through the hearing. So don't bring in new information.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that the viability of downtown is greatly hampered by the buildings across the street, across the river. So we're talking about one small area that we're trying to pin all of our hopes on in this one particular retail area. Until the properties across the river get straightened out and actually become productive, nothing else is going to be viable down in the downtown. So I think, although I agree with the comments said over here, it's just that with the town the way it is down in Centerton, you just walk out the town hall and you're immediately hit in the face with Capital Products building and others that are across the street, which basically this particular property in question is small fry compared to the bigger issues that we have in downtown.
As long as you mentioned buildings across the way, I would think that those would take a good look at the hub itself, the downtown across the street, to see if they want to be resident, another small business, and I believe they'd much rather see a vibrant retail there than just a health center across the river if you were to move in, live there, or develop that section.
Is to the suitability of the location for use and so forth, and I tend to agree with my compatriots that POCD and everything else that we have studied and discussed looked to the viability of the center through retail growth. My hesitancy is the fact that John will retire and that store will become vacant. And I have not seen anything in the 45 years that I've been here that makes me believe that out of nowhere we're going to find something. So in that standpoint, within the regs, I believe we could justify its existence. We'll move on to the second item, which is the appropriate improvements, whether the site improvements associated with the proposed development, location of the building and activities, design of building, extended landscaping will be attractive and suitable in relation to the site and existing and the probable future character of the neighborhood in which the use is located.
This is what I mentioned earlier during the open hearing. I think that anything that has to be done to the site could be done as a condition. I think the applicant has shown interest in complying with the Architecture Review Commission, which suggested a planted area on the north side of the building with plants that are appropriate for that kind of situation. But in addition to that, the parking area, and which actually could come under C, but it's still part of the appropriate improvements. There's still work that should be done and presented to the commission for compliance with handicap parking with a flow on the parking area for delivery by bus traffic or taxi, so safe operation there. And then the same thing with pedestrian access across that parking lot, which there's usually a lot of flow through that area.
Okay, the last sentence is where I think I have a concern, and that will be attractive and suitable in relation to the site, an existing and probable future character of the neighborhood. This will forever change the character of this neighborhood, and it will change the character of Winsted. And while I can appreciate the value of what you do, I am reluctant to change the character of our downtown any more than it has already been altered by other venues. Through the years in Winsted, there have been many, many decisions that were made. I could go through a couple of them, but I'm supposed to stay with the issue here. Those issues came back to bite us, and we have to live with them, and we have lived with them for years and years and years. We have to consider very strongly before we put the nail into the coffin of this town by not keeping it open for retail, and that's it.
I think it was mentioned by the applicant that they were willing to work with our architectural committee, and that was the main purpose why we added the architectural committee to our process in this past couple of months. So I'm sure that through the architectural committee that they will work with the applicant in order to come up with a suitable and appropriate exterior that meets the character of the downtown.
I would concur with that. The next item is suitable transportation conditions, whether the nature of the proposed use or activity and the characteristics of the transportation system will adversely affect safety in the streets or unreasonably increase traffic congestion in the areas or interfere with the pattern of vehicular circulation.
This is again how we handle the site conditions. The Main Street is a busy thoroughfare, and there's parallel parking along that whole section in front of the subject property. So basically, the off of the main thoroughfare into the back parking area is where I would say traffic congestion has to be controlled, and an appropriate layout on the site have to be done. And that's not shown right now, it just shows what the existing parking area is. So that's something is not suitably addressed here, but it could be conditioned.
No, the site plan.
Yeah, would have to be updated.
No, it's just that the site plans, we changed all our regulations, we required certain things, and you get a site plan that's not really an up-to-date site plan. And, I'm sorry. I agree with you, George.
I believe the site plans could be conditioned to accept whatever omissions are shown or not shown. Okay, the next item is adequate public utilities with provisions for water supply, sewage disposal, stormwater drainage will conform to accepted practices and not unduly burden the capacity of such facilities.
Again, this is talking to public water and sewer and so forth for facilities. The amount of water use is, I'm sure, going to increase with this kind of a location. However, the Main Street corridor has adequate sewer capacity and certainly enough water supply, so there shouldn't be a problem with this particular application.
I have no problems with that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to usurp you. I apologize. Okay, environmental protection and conservation, whether appropriate considerations have been given to the protection, preservation, and/or enhancement of natural, scenic, historic, and unique resources. Any comments on that?
Well, there's actually one before that, Craig, the adequate public services, that's where we talked about accessibility for emergency response, fire, police protection, and so forth.
Sorry.
There's been nothing discussed with regards to that in the application. We see the floor plan, but it doesn't show that there's appropriate steps being taken for those types of needs. Of course, the building permit process would take care of appropriate egress and the lighting and so forth for emergency access.
The building and fire marshal did review it and didn't throw up any red flags.
But this isn't the building permit part of it.
Right, there's probably nothing that couldn't be addressed, if there was anything that couldn't be addressed.
On the actual
I agree
drawings
with
of
that. I
the
think the
interior.
final plans would
Final plans.
The only thing on the record was that there was no problem. Basically, yeah.
With the site plan.
And, okay, so I guess I jumped ahead, so I guess my pay will be docked. Environmental protection, conservation. Do we have any comments on? I don't think it really is applicable. The only thing, the historic or scenic would be changing that, putting something around the garbage thing there. Long-term viability, whether adequate provisions have been made for sustained maintenance of the proposed development structures, streets, and other improvements. No comments? No comments, okay. Next is purposes where the proposed use or activity will conflict with the purposes of the regulations, of these regulations, Winchester zoning regulations. The purposes, let me get that right. The purposes of these regulations, the Winsted zoning regulations.
Okay, this is what I also brought up during open session, and this is one of the areas that I think that this diverges, moves away from what we're really shooting for through the POCD, and the POCD is definitely part of the overall defining regulations that we have to go with, because our zoning regulations come out of what our POCD has come up with. And the intent of that is for the town center development and enhancement that we've mentioned a couple of times, or more than that. It needs to come in and be in harmony with the rest of the retail developments in town, so that there's a compatibility and kind of a shared traffic patterns that will be feeding off of each of these in the downtown core area.
I stand with you. I think that based on the plan of conservation and development, which was also when they were putting the plan of conservation and development together, all of those many reports regarding what we should be doing with our downtown were considered. So when you're looking at going down the steps, I have an issue with what the future brings with changing our regulations, or not changing our regulations, with approving this particular application.
Once again, as I stated earlier, that this particular application does meet with our regulations as far as use. And once again, there's ample opportunity with various properties downtown that are not even being used at this point, so we can still realize the intent and spirit of the POCD. So I think from a point where we'll be judged on how we vote and whether we approve or not approve this particular application will be based on our adherence to the regulations, which have been clearly identified as the applicant meeting them on various sections.
Again, I would reiterate that I would share the same feelings. The plan of conservation and development, whether the proposed use or activity will facilitate achievement of one or more goals, objectives, policies, and recommendations of the plan of conservation and development.
I think the heart of the plan of conservation and development highlighted the importance of re-establishing a plan of improvement in our downtown corridor. I mentioned some specifics from the POCD, looking at the negative impact of value since 2007. And this step in this direction would curtail one of the largest pieces that we have available for us with parking and so forth on site to attract a viable part of this downtown community and retail hub that we want to see happen, and that's the long-term goal that we have for this, what the POCD is talking about. So this is, I'd say, does not fit that recommendation of the plan, which is really at the core of the POCD.
I would agree with what you're saying. And this town, I believe, is on the cusp of turning around. I think it would be a very imprudent measure for us to approve this in light of the fact that we are being recognized now. Every report that comes up seems to show advancement in that direction. And for me, I think this would be a very imprudent decision to vote this.
As was stated earlier, the reality on the ground is that 56% of the population in this town are low income. I don't know who is going to visit these retail stores that you're talking about, but from the standpoint of what is needed and what fits the community, it's the fact that we do have a large number of people who would find this particular facility a great need. And as I've said before, there's plenty of opportunity elsewhere on Main Street to take advantage of other aspects of the POCD.
Though it doesn't fit into the plan of conservation exactly, I think within the parameters of our zoning regs, that it is well within the confines of those objectives. Steve, do you have anything you want to add to this?
I would just discuss the fact that they offered that front portion out to 200 square feet for retail.
For the record, I would like to indicate that the applicant has made available 2,500 plus square feet in the event that there is interest in opening that up to retail from
2350 to be exact.
2350. Okay, I exaggerated. I apologize. But I'd like the record to show that.
One of the things in your letter, staff notes, was the fact that there could be a second floor that could be put into that building.
Perhaps, yeah, in the future.
So
could also add up back as well.
So it doesn't preclude a retail or something above, should it? Should the demand?
No, I mean, typically you want retail on the first floor, but I guess you could. Yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion?
You want a motion?
Yeah, I think we should move to the motion.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve application number 17-04, special permit, applicant, Community Health and Wellness Center of Torrington, Inc., owner Super Saver Property, LLC, location 372-376 Main Street and 30 Elm Street, proposed relocation and expansion, map 110, block 001, lots 2A, 18, and 18A. Based on testimony and subject to the following conditions. Evaluating this application, the Planning and Zoning Commission has relied upon information provided by the applicant, and if such information subsequently proves to be false, deceptive, incomplete, and/or inaccurate, this permit shall be modified, suspended, or revoked. 2. Approvals as per the following submitted plans. A2 survey prepared by DeCara Land Surveying Services entitled Realignment Plan prepared for Winsted Super Saver Property, LLC, 372 to 376 Main Street and 26 and 30 Elm Street, Winchester, Connecticut, dated December 2016, scale 1:20. Drawing submitted by Architectural Studio 3C, LLC, entitled Proposed Satellite Office for Community Health and Wellness Center of Torrington, Center of Greater Torrington, 372-376 Main Street, Winchester, Connecticut, dated 28 February 2017, 1/8 inch equals a foot. Sheets X1.1, existing floor plan and elevations, SK1.1, schematic floor plan, and Drawing submitted by Architectural Studio 3C LLC entitled Proposed Satellite Office for Community Health and Wellness, Center of Greater Torrington, 372-376 Main Street, Winchester, Connecticut, dated 6 March 2017, 1/8 inch equals 1 foot, sheets SK.1, schematic floor plan. In addition, number 3, accessible parking spaces as required shall be shown on the final site plan and approved by the building official and installed before the CO is issued. 4, the dumpster enclosure shall be repaired to meet the regulations before the CO is issued. 5, a landscape strip shall be installed at 6 feet deep across the back of the building other than where doors are located and planted with a variety of shape-tolerant plantings. 6, Community Health and Wellness Center of Greater Torrington Incorporated utilize the future expansion space shown on the plans in the future, provided the services provided are the same as those approved under this permit. A separate application shall be submitted for this space and is not used by CHWC.
Because they offered, you might want to change that last one.
Yeah.
That was assuming that they were going to use it, but since that was written,
We incorporate it.
But that's the public application.
This was not part of the original application.
no, that's proposed conditions, and the last one, these were written a while ago. The last one was written before
I understand.
the offer, so that allows them to use it, but they would have to come back in. But you can change that if you want, so that it would have to be retail. And they've agreed to that, so it's up to you how you want to.
Why don't we leave it the way it is?
Because it'd be a simple process if, in fact, they chose to do that.
No, I just think by making it mandatory that it has to be retail or restaurant use, that it would go further to satisfying the issues that you have with the POCD. It would keep that space retail on Main Street. So you could certainly mandate that. If you leave it as it is, and if you approve it, then they can come back in and put another couple dentist chairs in there or whatever. Remove that chance for that retail.
I don't think it removes it.
Your call.
George, could you read that again?
Number 6 would be Community Health and Wellness Center of Greater Torrington Incorporated utilize the future expansion, which is that 2350 or whatever, space shown on the plans in the future, provided the services provided are the same as those approved under this permit. A separate application shall be submitted for this space if it is not used by the CHWC.
So basically, you're pre-approving them to use that space to expand with that condition.
Right.
So they don't have to come back in for a new special permit or anything like that.
Should be for future retail use.
I see your point, though. I mean, it would be a protection.
By doing that, you're forcing that front to remain retail. And if they wanted to make it become part of their medical office, then they would have to come back in and get the permit changed.
Change it
So it does.
from retail to
I only
medical.
brought it up because it does address leaving retail on Main Street.
But the public wasn't notified of that.
We talked about it today.
It was at
But
a
anyway.
public hearing. Now you got a different application. We did notify the public. At the last public hearing.
Don't, you can't talk during the hearing.
Sorry.
Okay,
We definitely talked about this during the hearing today, that they had offered it.
That's
It was
correct.
in testimony. I mentioned it, it was in testimony, that they had offered to leave that 2350 as retail. So it's no surprise, it was out in the hearing.
So what you're
Definitely.
suggesting is change this to keep it as retail.
Right. Make a condition, the 2,350 square feet in the front, that's depicted, whatever it's depicted, I have it written there,
Is a future expansion.
shall be utilized only for retail or restaurant use. What did I say?
yeah, it was in your,
But on the other side of that, if in fact they're so successful with what they're doing, they may need that other space.
Well, they can come in and get the special permit modified, or they can go up. You know,
So the wording here doesn't hurt that.
Yeah, it doesn't. they can.
Well, it hurts ever having retail in there.
Put the word
I mean, they-
retail.
Unless, if they wanted to go retail, they could come back and ask for approval for that. That's the way I
Anything
read it.
but weekend or restaurant.
No. If they're not going to utilize it for their use, then they have to come back and submit it.
But I see what he's saying, because it would designate it to retailer or restaurant use.
I say grocery, retail, or restaurant.
Correct.
Yeah.
It would restrict, not restrict it, but it
They
would
could still come back
designate
and
it.
and ask for a change.
That is a condition that will force improvement upon the negatives that you found in this application. So it's just an option. You don't have to do it.
I see that as an option anyways.
Commission wish to put the retail restriction in there.
I'm going to defer to someone who's much more familiar with
Terry,
regulations and
So keep it as it is.
other towns.
keep it as it is? Okay. You're so inclined? Art?
I agree with Barb, whatever he thinks somebody with the wording should be. Does.
Well, let's make a decision.
And well, the whole thing is, I mean, are we changing the character of the application by putting that in, or changing it, or altering it?
Modified. We talked about it at the hearing. Yeah, it's no.
Well, the floor plan would have to be modified, obviously, to get another entrance at that point.
Right.
It's
Well,
not-
they could come in and turn right. That's pretty common. Then the second door would be a locking door.
well,
That's a minor
Whatever.
detail. Yeah. There's two doors already shown, one before it and one after it. So.
Okay, so I take it the majority of the commission is that we leave it as read into the record?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, all those in favor of approval of application 1704?
Did we get a second?
Let me get a second. I'll
Yes.
second it.
Yes. Did I
No,
not
you
get
didn't ask
second?
that yet, but I'll give it to
Any
you.
further
Oh,
discussion?
okay. Any further discussion? No?
The only thing I'd like to say is that this particular application meets a number of the special requirements as per our regulations. So I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. All those in favor of of approval of application 1704? Those who do not approve, opposed, excuse me. Okay, fails 2-3.
A copy of the voice recording of this total P&Z meeting, including other applications, is available at the town hall, as are all the other papers that were passed out during this meeting and before the meeting, etc. Well, you heard that decision. The Health and Wellness Center was denied the application to move into John Dewan's Super Saver. On that vote, following the meeting, a letter was received from Mr. Williams, the attorney for the Health and Wellness Center, Torrington, Connecticut. There were a lot of questions in that letter. Maybe next week I'll read the letter to you. It has also been read on other programs. But he was basically saying that certain people should have recused themselves because they were involved with the local hospital, either on their board or friends of people that were on their board, or they used to be on their board, that kind of thing. And that wasn't done. So he stated a lot of reasons like that. They had a meeting on April 24th with the town attorney. It's called executive session, where nobody can go in except the attorney, the commission member, people like that. No press is allowed, no residents are allowed. They have to wait out in the hall until it's over. That meeting lasted about a half an hour. I was standing out in the hall with the other people, chatting away. And when we went in to the meeting, the chairman of Planning and Zoning made a statement. I will play that statement for you now. Well, that's it for this week. I played what I could out of the last meeting a couple days ago so that you can hear some of the comments. But I kept it to the issue. POCD, P&Z regs, public hearing, number 2, health and wellness, Torrington. You can hear my views on the POCD and the regulations if you watch my program, Make Winsted Great Again. It's on twice a week. You'll enjoy it if you watch it, but it's way up in the air. If you can get the strategy right, then the POCD and the regs will be different. Good night. Brian O'Hearn. See you next week.